This is my presentation on Al-Qaeda, a global terror organization that has been an enemy to the United States for over 3 decades now, and is still one of our main targets in the war on terror. The goal of this presentation is to give a short history on Al-Qaeda and who they are and where they started from. And then another objective is to give a background on Osama bin Laden, who was one of the notorious masterminds behind the group since its inception. Also to point out any leadership changes that are there or that have happened since the death of bin Laden, and then a look at the organization today. So Al-Qaeda is a terrorist organization which was founded by Osama bin Laden back in the late 1980s. And bin Laden and a couple of his friends that he met in college actually came up with the idea of the group. And so they relocated from Pakistan to Afghanistan when they realized that the Soviets were pulling out after the Persian Gulf War. And it was at this time that bin Laden and his associates decided that they were going to take this and move towards a global jihad. A global jihad refers to an armed group of militants with the intent to expand the Islamic world. Jihad, in this case, tends to lead toward a world war on struggle against those opposed to the Islamic beliefs, which is what Al-Qaeda and their associates tend to look for in deciding who they're going to attack. Al-Qaeda has also been a group responsible for numerous attacks on the United States, including both the '93 bombing and the terror attacks on 9/11, along with another bombing against the U.S. Embassy in Kenya and Tanzania, resulting in the death of 224 people in '93. And these were all strands of attacks based on their interest on the global jihad. So as I mentioned, Osama bin Laden was one of the major leaders in Al-Qaeda up until his death in 2011. Bin Laden was born in 1957 to a millionaire father with close ties to the House of Saud. Osama was actually the 17th of about 50 children born to his father Muhammad. Osama's mother was a Syrian woman and believed to have been Muhammad's 11th wife. Bin Laden earned his degree in management and civil engineering. He married his first wife at the age of 17, 4 years after his father died. While he was at university, however, he began to hang around with Islamic radicals who inevitably pushed him towards being an extremist. At the start of the Persian Gulf War, bin Laden was disgusted when Saudi Arabia invited the United States to come help defend against a possible Iraqi invasion, citing that it was sacrilegious to invite American troops onto the same soil as the two holiest cities in Islam, Mecca and Medina. In and around 1989, bin Laden and his associates founded Al-Qaeda after realizing that there was an opportunity to gain control after the Soviet forces withdrew from Afghanistan. Bin Laden later approved the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, though it's questioned how much of the planning he was actually involved in. According to an article published by foreign press media, bin Laden may not have had any direct knowledge of the plan of the 9/11 attacks up until it needed his approval to be carried out. Once it was discovered that bin Laden and Al-Qaeda were responsible for the attacks, bin Laden quickly became the most wanted man in the world. Years later, on May 1st, 2011, as a result of a U.S. Special Forces raid on bin Laden's compound hideout in Pakistan, Osama bin Laden was found and killed by SEAL Team 6 in an undercover operation, given approval by President Barack Obama. After the death of bin Laden, Ayman al-Zawahiri took over the reins of the jihadist group. In February of the next year, Al-Qaeda merged with the Somali insurgent group of Al-Shabaab. Later that year, Zawahiri called on his followers to take advantage of the violence in Syria and make a move. At this time, Al-Qaeda changed its name to the Islamic State of Iraq and Al-Sham to show its growing nature and conflict in Syria. Later that year, ISIS cut their ties with Al-Qaeda after deciding to go against the order of Zawahiri, who called on his followers to quit the fighting in Syria and go back to Iraq. ISIS is now commanded by Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, and Al-Qaeda officially renounces ISIS as a part of the group in February 2014. Today, Al-Qaeda controls territory in Syria, Yemen, and Libya. Depending on the situation in Yemen and whether or not it deteriorates, Al-Qaeda may be able to come back in equal strength to its Islamic State counterparts. The Western media tends to cover ISIS more than Al-Qaeda due to the severity and flamboyancy of the tactics used by the Islamic State. Al-Qaeda remains patient and defensive, waiting for an opportunity to present themselves. Syria is more of a factor in the Muslim world than Yemen and Libya are in terms of necessary media coverage. Thus, the Western medias tend to follow the Islamic State closer.